Have you ever noticed that we complain a lot?
I don't want to marry Bruce Underwood. He's a snob and he's got pimples.
And by we, I mean ADHDers, not just people in general. I don't have any scientific research to back this up, but if you spend some time talking to people with ADHD, you'll find that there's an awful lot of complaining that happens. Some of it's a little bit more subtle, but yeah, not really.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So I was watching YouTube, as one does, and I came across this video from @UpSpiralLife, and I wanted to take a crack at it from an ADHD point of view. His stuff is very neurotypical, and that's fine. There's a lot of neurotypical people that need help with complaining, but a lot of the neurotypical productivity and self-help advice doesn't really work for people with ADHD. So I wanted to look at it through a neurospicy lens and see what we could come up with. So he mentions 6 points of why complaining is not good for our brains. The first one is that we're training our brain to be miserable. And from an ADHD perspective, that's certainly true. So when we focus on complaining, when we focus on bad things that happen, we see those things more often. It's a classic case of you find what you're looking for. For example, if you're going to buy a new car, let's just say you're looking at getting a Tesla, all of a sudden you see Teslas everywhere on the road and in parking lots. They're all over the place. They're coming out of the woodwork, and everybody has a Tesla. When in actuality, it's just our brains noticing them more. Our brains tend to be more filters of information as opposed to acquirers of information. There's so much going on around us all the time that we have to filter a lot of that information out. And that's part of the problem that we as ADHDers can have in certain situations. Like, for example, I don't do well in large crowds of people. There's just too much going on. There's too much overwhelm for me. So I don't really like being in those kinds of environments because my brain has a hard time filtering all of it out. But while we're training our brain to be miserable, a lot of that criticalness that we have around us is driving other people away because they don't want to be around it. It's really hard emotionally to be around people that are critical all the time. And if we're critical outside, what kind of criticality is going on inside? What does our self-talk look like? I think we will find that if we pay attention to our self-talk, how we talk to ourselves in our own head, we will find that we don't talk to anybody like that, not even our worst enemies. We are horrible to ourselves. And of course, all of this can lead to perfectionistic tendencies, where we're trying to be critical in order to make sure that everything's perfect, and we use that as a self-defense mechanism because we don't want to get hurt. And we have learned from our past that if we are critical and if we pay attention to what's going on so that we can't let anything bad happen, then we're less likely to get hurt. Unfortunately, that's not true.
I will never let anything happen to you.
The second point for being critical is that it increases our stress hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline running around in our systems chronically can cause some serious issues. Now, cortisol and adrenaline are important neurotransmitters in our brains, and they have their uses, and so we don't want to get rid of them entirely. For example, if we don't have cortisol, you're not going to be able to get out of bed in the morning. And adrenaline is required in order to make us move. And so we want both of those things. But when we have them chronically, like all the time, because we're constantly under a state of stress, then they turn from being good things to being things that are slowly destroying us. And, that's kind of a bad thing. When we have chronically high levels of cortisol and adrenaline, though, we end up not having as much focus. We end up being in bad moods. We end up having worse memories. And we get sick a lot more because our immune system's kind of in the dumps. Point number 3 was teaching our brain to spot problems. This is the whole, you see a Tesla everywhere kind of a point. But it goes a bit beyond that, because it's not just that we're teaching our brain to solve problems, we're teaching our brain that there are no solutions. As people who are neurospicy, we tend to be able to find patterns very well. We have lots of creativity, especially when we're bored and we have nothing to do.
Anyone? Anyone?
And all of those things go away when the brain doesn't even bother looking for solutions anymore because it thinks they don't exist. Point number 4 is that this puts our body into fight, flight, or freeze responses. Blood moves away from our digestion, and our body tends to get out of parasympathetic nervous system, which is what helps us to rest and recover. It also does something really interesting in our brains where it moves the blood out of our prefrontal cortex and into our limbic system in the back of our head. So the prefrontal cortex, we already have problems with as ADHDers. We have problems with executive function, planning, stuff like that, right? Time management, getting things done. All of those things happen in the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is much more emotional, it's much more reactive, and it triggers a heck of a lot easier. And so we have problems with that too. We have emotional regulation issues. A lot of us have anger issues
I'm always angry.
and impulse control and things like that. So moving the blood in this way makes it significantly worse for our ADHD symptoms that we already struggle with. Point number 5, brain shrinkage. And this is even more exciting because as we have these chronic blood flows away from our prefrontal cortex and into our limbic system, those parts of the brain either shrink or grow. So the prefrontal cortex shrinks and the limbic systems grow, which means our ADHD symptoms get chronically worse. So the last point, point number 6, is the default mode network. The default mode network is supposed to be reflective and creative. It's where we come up with interesting ideas. Now, when we constantly complain, it hijacks the default mode network and it turns it into this rumination spiral of hell, which for those of us who are neurospicy, that's like everyday life. So how do we deal with constant complaining? How do we make our lives better? Now, he listed 2 points. I'm going to expand that to probably 4, 5. Point number 1 is recognition. We need to recognize that complaining does not save us. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't solve anything. So why are we doing it? Once we have that recognition and we have that mindset that complaining and being critical does nothing beneficial, it doesn't keep us from having issues, it doesn't keep bad things from happening, then we can really move on to number 2. And step number 2 is to label it. When we catch ourselves complaining, say to ourselves, hey, we're complaining. Now that seems kind of dumb and stupid. However, it's enough to pull us out of that emotional response and back into our prefrontal cortex to the rational part of our brain. This will allow us to think through the problem, and it will help rewire our brain so that we stop looking for problems. We stop looking to be critical, and all of a sudden we can see opportunities and we can see different perspectives and we can see that there are solutions that are available. Step number 3, we need to move. Remember, as ADHDers, we are built to live in the physical world. We're built to move, and when we have high levels of cortisol and adrenaline, we need to get moving. So go for a walk, do a set of push-ups, do something physical to burn off those neurotransmitters, to take care of those hormones so that they do not adversely affect us. This is why exercising throughout the day is so helpful, because it helps to keep those levels of neurotransmitters, the cortisol and the adrenaline, low so that it doesn't adversely affect us throughout the day. I did a video on that. I'll throw a link somewhere. Step number 4 is to observe. So once we've labeled things and we're getting the stress hormones out of our system, we need to see the problem for what it really is, and then we need to see it for better than what it is. By doing this, we're rewiring our brains to look for the positive, and that will help us find solutions. Our brains are much more effective, much better at coming up with solutions, and much more creative when we're positive thinking.
It's a riddle.
Now, short rabbit hole story. I used to be someone who considered myself a realist. At least that's what I told myself. Really, that's just a Another way of saying I was a pessimist. I complained a lot, I was really critical, and I still do a lot of these things. However, looking for positive solutions has really changed how I view the world. Nothing outside has changed, but what's going on inside my own head is very different. Now, I'm not perfect at this. I still have issues. But life is so much better when you're seeing things from a good point of view, from an optimistic point of view. Now, some of you might be saying, yeah, but that's not real life. What is real life? Real life is your perception. So if you go through life thinking everything is in the crapper, that's your life. That's your perception. But if you view life as largely being positive, that's what your life is. And it's a much better way to live. Anyway, back on point. Nature abhors a vacuum. So once we label things that we're complaining and we're getting that out of our head, we need to put something positive in its place. And that's why we want to do this step number 4, to observe. We want to be able to see things as they really are, not worse than they are, because that's what complaining does. That's what being critical is. We want to see things for what they really are. And then we want to see things for better than they are. So for example, complaining looks at all the downsides of a particular event, but just see the event for what it is. Don't attach any emotional connotation to it. Don't put any interpretation on it of this thing happened, therefore it's bad. No, just see it for what it is. What happened? Okay, then look for the positive outcomes of this particular event. Step 5, and the final step, is really the chef's kiss. It's like the crowning achievement. It's putting all of this on, like, I don't know, the afterburner or the hyperdrive or whatever analogy you want to use. It's going through the events of the day and looking for coincidences that have happened to you. Good things, right? The things that happen one after another that seem to make our lives better, and writing them down. And that teaches our brain to look for the good things throughout the day. And then slowly we realize that there really is no such thing as a coincidence. And that just makes everything awesome. So I hope this helps, talking about complaining and ways that we can overcome it, because as ADHDers, like I said before, we tend to complain a lot, but we don't have to. It just makes our ADHD worse. And life is so much better when we look for the positive. So thanks for spending some time with me. I appreciate you, and I look forward to the next one where we engineer the crap out of ADHD.